All right, class, have you gotten the big four? Are you ready? Are you ready for the advanced stuff? All right, here we go. We're going to go into part three, advanced formatting. And some of these things aren't really advanced. They just didn't fit in with the big four. Okay, I'll be honest there. But they're all things you have to know. So the first thing is character introductions. And whenever you introduce a character in a script, their name needs to be in all caps. And when I mean introducing them, you're going to introduce them in the description and action. The first time the character appears in the script, you're going to put the person, maybe a little bit of a description of what they look like and things like that. And then their name is in all caps because this lets you know, oh, new character is just entered. Cool, I'll make a note of that. And you do that every time you have a new character. But that's the only time you do it. Just the first time is when you do all caps. So here we have interior surveillance van, Day, Kate Hardcastle in all caps. First time we're meeting her, an imposing woman with a tight ponytail, stands hunched over slightly. She clutches the mic stock of her headset. Go down a little bit to our description below that. And then we have the rest of the surveillance crew, Amanda Johnson Takamoto, also in all caps. First time we're meeting her at the recording console, and Chet Swisher with a clipboard, meeting him too. All these are in all caps. This is the only time they will be in all caps in the description. Now, they will still be in all caps whenever they speak. So we notice on the dialogue here, Hardcastle, Gemini, this is Sagittarius, repeat, what's your status? Her name is in all caps there. It's always going to be like that in dialogue. But the first time they're introduced in the script, names are in all caps. Cool, got that. Now, you don't want to introduce a character for the first time in someone else's dialogue. So the first time someone were to say, hey, Hardcastle, you're not going to put their name in all caps there because having it in all caps in the dialogue means something totally different. And that means yelling. Okay, so we're going to cover that now. So you can still use exclamation points and curse words, and God knows there's plenty of them right here. But if you want a character to yell, you put it in all caps. So it's just like Grandpa's emails. For some reason, he just always hits all caps with his pinky, and everything seems like he's yelling. I don't know why he does that, but he does. Maybe he is yelling. I don't know. He has hard time hearing, something like that. Into the scene, interior Hardcastle's office, Day, Dr. Rosenblatt's beet red, emphatically points her finger at Hardcastle. And then everything she says in the scene, pretty much, is all caps. There's one little part where it isn't. So she yells, "This is unacceptable." All caps, it makes an impression. That goes with yelling. "These punks are eroding the moral fiber of my classroom." Try to read that without yelling. You need to get out there and do your fucking job. Yes, she curses. She curses a lot in the script. She's our main cursor here. I don't even know why this campus has a police department. You people are worthless. So she goes back into the yelling again. That's what all caps are for. So if you have a character that yells all the time, I had a character in a script years ago, and he never said anything that wasn't yelled. So I just wrote everything in all caps. It was very liberating. It was kind of cool to have a character like that. You're probably not going to want to overuse it like that, but when a character needs to yell, put it in all caps. Next, we have parentheticals. And one caveat here, I'm not a fan of parentheticals, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. So if you absolutely, positively have to have a character do something while they are speaking, this is how you do it. But you're going to be on a quota of one parenthetical per script, unless I give you permission to do more than that. And the reason for that is parentheticals are kind of like crack cocaine. You try it once and you got to have more. I'm not speaking from experience. I've never had crack cocaine, but this is the way they used to describe it back in the 80s. And what happens is I have students who use a parenthetical and they're like, oh, that was great. That felt really good. I need to do it more. And then every single time a character speaks, there's a parenthetical. And the parentheticals get longer and longer and longer. And it completely takes over the script to the point where there is no regular description. So in that respect, it very much is like crack cocaine because it completely takes over this person's life and it ruins their writing career. It's over right there. So if we look in this scene right here, We've got a whole scene. Prius pulls up in front of them. It's driven by two huge goons. A tiny 20-ish man steps out of the back. Chili Dog, in all caps. We're meeting him for the first time. He holds a binder, walks up to Tito, then looks at Jesus. Go all the way down. There's only one parenthetical, and it's because you absolutely need to have it. So Chili Dog shuts up Jesus with a murderous look. He shifts his gaze to Tito. Give me your fucking money, plus 10% for family discount. And then he turns to Jesus and says, bro. It totally fits with the scene. In order for you to know that he's speaking to one character and then another character, the best way to do it is to use a parenthetical that lets you know that he's speaking to the other character for the second half of his little yelling bit there. And notice it's in all caps too, because he's yelling, bro, getting right in his face. We needed that. You don't want to overuse your parentheticals. I can't stress that enough. And you'll have me tell you this ad nauseum in the class. Don't overuse your parentheticals, or your privilege will be revoked. Okay? So continuous and other slugline shortcuts. This is what I alluded to in the previous lesson, that sometimes when you're going back and forth with scenes, there are going to be different ways to actually do that might abbreviate it. So sometimes you need them to flow more smoothly from one to another. And in that case, you can use continuous to suggest like continuous movement out of one scene into another. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a single shot, but it could, because you can have shots that go from one location into another location continuously. That's one reason. But you only want to use it when you really, really need it for that total smoothness and continuity from one scene into another. You can also abbreviate slug lines if you're switching back and forth between scenes regularly and you've already established the physical space and it's really clear what's going on and you're going back and forth. It's like, oh, we don't need to put the whole slug line there. We already know it's day. We already know that we're in the warehouse. Yada, yada. You can do that. So here's an example of a scene that uses a combination of both of those things. So full slug line, exterior parking lot, day. Then interior car, continuous. So it suggests there's a continuous flow from when they're walking to the car and then they get in. Continuous. It didn't have to be used. In fact, we saw the scene where it didn't have it before. I've added it in there because it is appropriate. So Jesus and Tito look at each other. The car explodes. This is from that interior car. And then exterior car, continuous. There's a smooth continuity from that first explosion into that slow motion explosion where you see the car from the outside. Continuous is appropriate there. You could do it in other ways too, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Interior surveillance van. Notice it does not have day at the end of it because we don't need it. Amanda's knocked over by the sound in the headphone. Kate's eyes go wide with shock. Chet screams. Exterior surveillance van. Kate slams the door open and falls to the ground, her headset clutched in her hand. She vomits, then throws her headset. So that's part of an action scene. We want it to flow. We want it to be quick. And in those kinds of cases, you are going to want to be able to abbreviate your slug lines and use continuous if possible. Now for the opposite effect, you have what's called cut to. And this is something that some people totally overuse as well. And I recommend that you just use it when you absolutely have to. And cut to is when you want to have a cut that just slams into another. So something's happening and then something really abruptly shifts. Then you use a cut to. So here's an example here. Interior campus police day. Tiffany sits alone in the office. She looks around, then pulls out her phone and talks. Hi, honey, I'm bored. Everybody is out on some super secret mission. They've got some new person. She's Russian, I think. Cut to. We're meant to see and feel this cut. Exterior, strip mall day. Chili Dog stands tensely with his 1975 Mustang, holding his phone. Did you say Russian? Like from Russia? So the idea being that we are getting a major revelation here. And so that reveal that Tiffany is actually the mole and she's spilling information to Chili Dog requires a cut to so we can really feel that. But don't overuse it. Next we have off-screen. And we're going to talk about off-screen and voiceover, and these two things can sometimes interchange a little bit, and we'll talk about that. So when a character's voice is heard, but they cannot be seen, so mom is yelling from downstairs and we're in the character's room, we hear her voice, but we don't see her, that's an example of off-screen. Um, Here's an example right now. Interior surveillance van day. So we've got Hardcastle, Amanda, and Chet are at their posts in the surveillance van. Hardcastle is there, so her dialogue is normal. Roxana is not there. All we're hearing is her voice. So we have Roxana, O period, S period. Cancer here, I'm crossing the bridge. So she is speaking on a radio, and Hardcastle is listening to that. So we hear her voice, we don't see her, so she is off screen, O period S. We have that for the whole scene for Roxana because we don't see Roxana in the scene. If we were going to see Roxana, then she needs her own scene, and then Hardcastle would be OS. She would be off screen as well. But in this particular scene, it's Roxana is off screen, and all the other characters are on. So next we have voiceover, which is formatted in a similar way, but you use it in a different context. So if we have a character who's not in the scene and they're speaking, but their voice is kind of like a voice of God or something like that, that's when you want to use a VO. Okay, so in this case, we have a flashback, and I'll talk about flashbacks in a minute too. Interior car day, we have a scene that's unfolding, but then we have someone talking over it, and that becomes a voiceover. So Tito and Jesus are blown to smithereens, Hardcastle, VO, voiceover, just as we think we have them. Interior, another car day, two other young men are blown to smithereens, Hardcastle, VO, they slip. And so she does this whole monologue where she's basically saying they slip from our grasp, and it cuts over a whole bunch of different scenes, which is kind of a complex way to do some visual exposition. But that VO is necessary to tie that all together. So it works kind of like narration, but we probably began with Hardcastle in the room talking, we see her, and then we cut into the flashback, and then her voice becomes a VO. It's also off screen, but it kind of works like a voiceover instead of off screen. If you were to put either one, it'd probably be correct, but I think VO is more appropriate in this case. You also use VO for traditional narration, but I recommend you don't do that because narration sucks. I'm sorry. There are cases where you can use it, okay, but most people overuse it. So if you're going to do a VO and I'm reading your script, I'm going to make a determination. Do we need this? Do we not need this? It really depends on how you do, okay? Next we have flashback. So we got a taste of a flashback there. This is the way a flashback works. The way you do it is it kind of brackets a scene. So at the very beginning we have begin flashback, colon, one of the only times you really get to use a colon in a script without me throwing a shit fit at you. And we'll talk about that. Plays, you use tons of colons, and people, oh, okay, it's a script, you use a colon. It's like, you rarely use colons. This is one example where you do. So begin flashback, colon, we have the flashback, at the end of it, end flashback, period. So those two things hold the scene within them, and then we go back to our normal lives. So begin flashback, interior classroom day, a hulking student, a Doritos t-shirt, texting in class, he's covered in crumbs. And then we have this interaction between Dr. Rosenblatz, who is OS, so we don't see her. We just see the student whose name is Stump. And Dr. Rosenblatz is talking to him, and it's all him with his Dorito-covered shirt. And then we have a second part of the flashback, which is kind of a flashback within a flashback. Dr. Rosenblatz Garcia fills out a progress report for Austin Stump, checks every box for needs improvement in these areas, and then we have the end flashback. And then this will go back to the scene where she is remembering him. Or in this case, I think she's noticing that he has cheated on a paper or plagiarized it. So next we have montage, and montage is very similar to flashback in the way you structure it because it also brackets a scene. And I actually had to go to a different script. All this has been from a script called Cheaters, and this one is actually from a different script called The Albino Horror of Hicks Road. And montages are another thing where it kind of takes you out of the regular part of the action, and you have to set it apart with these bracketing. It'll begin montage, colon, end montage, period. But the way you write it is a little bit different. So in this case, we have a regular scene, then we begin a montage, which is a chase montage. Exterior dark forest day, slash, or you could use an arrow. Tyler runs alone down the path looking behind him. Twyla and Kylie run through some trees screaming. If we were to do a separate scene for each one of those, it would get very cumbersome. And you can do it that way, but very often when people are writing montages, they kind of condense it. So you've got image, 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 boom, then you're out again. So that's the whole point of a montage. It's a bunch of things going at you relatively quickly. You want to be able to write it that way too. Okay, so behind the tree, Kyle tries to text, and Albino grabs the phone and runs off. Kyle goes, hey, and then he chases after the albino. Boom, we're out of the montage, and then we come back to normal script writing format. Okay, so all of these are things you're going to cross at some point in your scripts. Maybe not in every script, but you'll come across them. And they're not all of the techniques, unfortunately. There's going to be some other ones we're going to come into, and I hope you folks challenge yourselves and are writing things where it's like, well, I really want to write this, but I don't know how to do it. And that's something we can learn how to do it in the class. It's like, oh, wow, this is really complex. You've got a montage within a flashback with a VO over the top of it, but in that you've got this character who's off screen, and we've got a bunch of continuous and cut twos and a whole lot of stuff. So it can get very complex. But once you start putting these together, these building blocks on top of the big four, you should be good to go.